Yeah. And Aaron, really appreciate you chiming in here. It's awesome that we're recording this, and we we do have a live comment, so that's cool. Um, so, I mean, the way I'm interpreting this is, do we think that uh, the USC defense, we're familiar with it, and that's a positive. Is it sort of like playing against ourselves potentially? At least the way I interpret that question. Go ahead.
Well, I don't. The thing about the Michigan defense, not the Michigan defense from last year. I mean, that's hopefully. I don't think they're going to be that good, but they are better. I mean, they hired a defensive coordinator. They took him from UCLA. He's John Harbaugh. He's got some links to him. So, he's installed the defense, and he's got these guys instead of always slanting and leaning. They're playing straight ahead, and they're just playing physical ball. So they're really and it's always been the thing, and we'll talk about Lincoln Riley and what he's been able to do on offense. I mean, there's never been anybody that said, "Oh, Lincoln Riley." It's always been, "Can you get a serviceable defense?" Well, they were more than serviceable against LSU, so that's made them really scary. That's why the line has moved, and they've got this defensive end, number 6. He's pretty good. Listening to Donovan Edwards on Monday at his press conference, he talked about these safeties come downhill from what he's seen, pretty good tacklers. And from what I saw against LSU, that was the thing, that they looked like they weren't just going to be this patty cake defense, this Southern Cal team that was coming up like the Beach Boys, thinking that they were going to be able to stop Michigan. So not last year's defense, but, just a formidable group. And so I wouldn't compare them like to last year's defense and Michigan's defense. I'm not sure. I don't know. They don't have a calling card right now. It's really been a shock. I mean, again, the offensive stuff, I understand. The defensive issues, I'm more perplexed about. But I when you have most, and we're familiar with a lot of the players, well, what do? You go to the coaching staff, which is all new defensively, and then certainly Wink Martindale. He's not running the same thing that they ran the last 3 years. I mean, you can say that this is what they're doing in a 3-4 or whatever else, but Michigan's blitz rate was I don't know, in the 40s last year in the country, and now it's top 5. I mean, Wink Martindale's blitzing all the time. Like, people said, well, I hope he doesn't blitz all. Well, he's blitzing a lot, and it's changed Michigan's identity on that side of the ball. All of that being said, I'm going to, again, cut this short. I'm saying a lot of this like, oh, no, the offense is bad. The defense is bad. All these things aren't lining up for Michigan. They come out and play a solid game, and they beat USC. They're right back on track, and you're feeling a lot different about all this. But heading in, there's a lot of red flags. But they can chop those red flags down with a great showing on Saturday.
Yeah. And I think we have a 1-game season, is what I would say.
Right? Agreed.
So with that, I'm going to give kind of a little bit of a report card of what I think has happened, and I'm not going to get into the details. I actually recorded a separate session where I kind of go through these details, which is basically in an Excel spreadsheet. And Dennis, I think when we were talking about before the show, I want to make this. I want to be able to distill this in terms of, what are the 2 or 3 things that we should really be looking at in terms of numbers that matter. And when I started looking at, I have this big spreadsheet with, all of the defensive numbers. And when you look at that, you realize that really, we're allowing a ton of first downs per game. That's one of the indicators that's looking pretty bad. We are not getting fumbles. That's another piece. The actual completion percentage against is relatively high, as well. Are these all kind of fixable things? I tend to think yes, but I will also say your thoughts on Wink Martindale. There's some issues there because I don't know if he thinks this is a pro offense and the personnel that he has can handle things in a different way. The fear originally was this Don Brown 2.0. I don't know if you think that kind of thing or not, but maybe the way I'm thinking of it is Does he think that these players are actually better than they are because he's thinking of them of what a pro can do versus a college player?
Yeah, I think that last part is the one I would go with. He spent the majority of his coaching career in the pros as a defensive coordinator, and there's a lot of similarity now. It was really a stark contrast. If we were going back 5 years ago, you say, oh, there's going to be an adjustment period if you have a college guy going to the pros or vice versa. But, there's a lot of carryover now when it comes to both games in a lot of different ways, even paying the money and everything else. But I think that there's an adjustment period with Wink Martindale, and it's tough. It's tough when a guy has made it to the position that he has. And I would say if I was sitting down with Wink Martindale, like, Wink, why don't you just go with what Jesse Minter was doing? Why don't you just pretty much copy that and then tweak a little things instead of coming in saying, hey, this is the way I think it should be, and trying to force that in. And it hasn't worked so far. Now, again, proof's going to be coming up on Saturday, where this is I don't what did you call it, a 1-game season? So okay, I'll throw it out there. This is a referendum game for Wink Martindale in his Michigan career. And the thing is, Steve Sarkisian is a tremendous offensive mind. He can scheme up things, and you saw that with Texas. And yeah, they got a great quarterback. And they did a good job getting wide receivers in the portal. The tight end looked like he's going to be great. But you could see the scheme. You could see him right when it was a zone, stressing Michigan's defense. And you saw the confusion and Michigan not being able to communicate. And it led to some easy scores for Texas. And the thing about Lincoln Riley coming in, Moss Miller, no, he's not Quinn Ewers, but they've got a hell of a wide receiver in Branch, and they've got a lot of speed, and they brought a nice running back in from the transfer portal. Lincoln Riley can scheme up as good or better than Sark. So to me, that makes me nervous about Michigan's defense. And, even Arkansas State, I know, you look at the numbers, you say, oh, well, Michigan did pretty good against Arkansas State. They did against the run, but the third down completion is a little bit disturbing, and it just continued to be one of these things. You completely flip it. All of those things that you talked about, what Michigan was so good at last year, not committing penalties, getting turnovers, getting scores by your defense, and that's all been reversed. And a lot of that, you can chalk up to, you would say, well, there's a lot of different personnel, and offensively, yeah, those penalties, but defensively, you don't really have that. Now, Phil Steele does college football. He does a college football magazine. He's got a service. He's been doing it for 30 years. I always have been interested in Phil Steele, but Phil always has talked about, from year to year, the turnover margin. It's something that's not sustainable. There's a lot of luck involved in it. Now, you'd say, well, Michigan had great players, and so that's why they're getting a lot of turnovers. And I tend to think that too. But it's still, when you look at the data, 25 years, 30 years, there isn't a great amount of carryover when it comes, even if you have the same personnel when it comes to turnover margin.